Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Story Behind the Stories for the February 23rd, 2024 edition of the Neepawa Banner Press. I'm your host this week, Casper Wehrhahn, reporter, photographer, and archivist for the Neepawa Banner Press. And I'm here this week with special guest, owner and publisher, Ken Waddell. Ken, thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's good to be here. Give Owen a break.
Yes, for sure. And, good as place to start as any. We had some good weather over the long weekend, and with that came activities. And we have some of those activities featured on our front page this week, starting down in Neepawa here, right in town, with the Neepawa Winter Festival. So we have some photos there of fireworks, fire pit activities, and of course there was a glow-in-the-dark adventure there this year. Down at the flats in Neepawa. I believe that was on February 18th, that evening there. So we had photos from myself. We had some submitted from Jody Baker and Jem Mendoza as well. Very thankful to have those submissions in the paper with our own stuff as well. It looked like it was a good turnout this year too, Ken.
Oh yeah, a lot of good reports. I wasn't able to be down there, but I certainly got lots of reports back. Pardon my voice, sorry. And you can just tell by the essence of it is caught in the pictures here that people were having a lot of fun. A lot of really good reports, excellent weather. One report was, after the sun went down, it got pretty cool. So they were happy enough that the events didn't go on too late into the evening. But fireworks came off well, and I've got a great picture on the front page there of the fireworks. And there was a lot of fun. And they had big lineups for the sleigh rides, and people were walking all around the trails and stuff like that. So, and of course the outdoor skating rink was pretty busy, and they had some good weather for skating a few days afterwards. I was past there a couple of days later, and it was actually Monday, and it was pretty darn nice to see all the kids out on the rink there. So it was good.
Definitely, yeah, and just going down there myself, doing my rounds, as it were, in the evening, it really was just full, that rink. Even later in the evening when I was down there getting ready to take pictures of the fireworks, I could see kids on the ice there just having a good time and doing all the other activities down there. And speaking of the weather that you mentioned as well, going into the evening, having gone there earlier for like 6 o'clock-ish, or no, not 6 o'clock, I was there a little bit earlier than that for something, I believe. And I can't recall what time it was now, but I was there, it was fine, didn't need my gloves at all. I was like, oh, it's nice out still. I'll go down for the fireworks, I don't need my gloves. Oh man, was I wrong. I was sitting there. Yeah. I was early, of course, because I didn't want to, if they happened to start a little bit earlier than planned, I didn't want to miss anything. And I was sitting there waiting for fireworks. I was like, oh, I should have brought my gloves. I had my hands tucked into my pockets and balled in the fists, making sure my thumbs stay warm and the rest of my hands stay warm. And oh my goodness. But it was pretty decent weather aside from the chillier evening, and it was a good fireworks show, I have to say. Yeah. It was really nice.
Yeah, and people expect a much longer one, of course, for July 1st. But this wasn't as long a show, but you didn't want to stand out that much longer anyway. So the first 5 minutes are probably the best 5 minutes anyway. But I understand it was a 10 or 15-minute show, so that was good.
Yeah, it was good. All right, moving down the road here to our neighbors in Minnedosa. I was out there that weekend as well. We have this stuff on page 19. They were doing their annual Skate the Lake and Rock the Lake festivities. And that, oh man, I know it's an impressive event, just seeing pictures from the past. But going down there myself and seeing it in person, it's got a pretty big scale.
Oh yeah,
those rinks out there. They have a lot of rinks cleared on the ice.
8 or 10 ice surfaces cleared off, I think. And
yeah.
No, it's an impressive show. There's no question about it. They do a great job on this, and it's been an annual event for quite a while too. And people really look forward to it. Yeah,
their 16th annual, I think, Skate the Lake, and then I think their 5th or 6th Rock the Lake festivities. The Rock Lake is a little bit newer to this occasion, but yeah, everyone was out there having a great time. Some of the kids were really giving it on the ice there for the hockey in particular, which is really interesting to watch too.
Yeah, no, there's something about playing hockey outdoors. You throw abandon to the wind and or caution to the wind, and away they go. And I used to play on an outdoor rink when I was a kid. My kids did, my grandchildren did, still do. And now my great-grandsons, one of them is just hockey crazy. Put him anywhere near a piece of ice and out come the skates, I'll tell you. Away he goes. They just love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually myself haven't been skating for quite a while. I can't recall the last time I ever put skates on, but it's a whole whack load of fun. So, yeah. All right, still in Minnedosa. This is less so outdoor activities, more indoors. But still happened over the long weekend, and another big event for the community of Minnedosa and really the area. They were doing their Curling for a Cure, which is an annual fundraiser for cancer care in Manitoba specifically, I believe. Held annually. This is their 5th or 6th year. I'd have to double check that, but I'm sure I've got it in the story. 5th?
Yeah, 5th
Thank
year,
you. Yeah. So 5th year. And it had a big response, which nothing new to them. They've had a big response the past 4 years. But I went down there that day, same day as I went to the Skate Lake and Rocks Lake, and the rink lobby was packed. I think I barely had room to move in there. But it was right full. People were having a good time, enjoying some music and food, and there were some prizes set out there. And of course, the teams were out there curling on the ice, or at least some of the teams that were there for that draw period. And I wasn't expecting this so soon, Ken, but the Tuesday I came back into the office after the long weekend, I already had results sent to me.
That's impressive.
Which was really impressive. Yeah. That usually doesn't happen that fast for anything, really. Yeah. But I got those in from Chad, one of the head organizers there, and they raised $33,000.
Yeah.
Which just blows my mind.
Well, $94,000 total. So the first 4 years was $60,000, and they raised half as much again in the 5th year.
Yeah.
So it's very impressive. Very,
very impressive. Yeah. Especially considering their long-term goal, which I had mentioned in a previous story, I believe, for this, which was that they were looking to do $100,000 total over 10 years. But they've pretty much got that in the 5 years. So I'm curious to see how that will progress in the remaining 5 years that they had set for their goal.
No, it's a fabulous thing that the Curling for a Cure. There's so many organizations and groups are willing to pitch in and help with this, because cancer affects us all, and I guess I maybe shouldn't say this, but we know this pretty well in my family, because my wife has got in for a second bout of cancer, and she starts chemotherapy on Tuesday coming up. So I wouldn't say we're anxious, but we're certainly watching that situation and sympathize with any family that has gone through the cancer battle. Yeah. Definitely,
yeah. And I mean, with this, and well, with any fundraiser, really, any sort of cause like this, every little bit helps, whether that's your personal donation that you've given toward the cause, or the donation as a whole together being put towards this, whatever groups it's going to. It means a lot. This actually ties in quite well with our next story here. We have one on page 19 to do with, page 18 to do with the Rotary and the Central Plains Cancer Services. We have a bit of an update for you on that. And Ken, this was a story that you did. Walk us through this.
Yeah, well, the Rotary Club is always bringing in, Neepawa Rotary Club, as all Rotary Clubs are. They bring in speakers usually at least once a month. And this last meeting, the Neepawa Rotary Club brought in Sherilyn Knox. Now, Sherilyn Knox was raised in Shoal Lake and in Gladstone, and she now lives in Portage la Prairie. Her family name is Finley. And she is now the mayor of Portage, but that's not why she was speaking in Neepawa that day. She is speaking in her role as the director of Central Plains Cancer Services. And the gist of her speech was that they raise money for people to have rides to cancer treatment, usually Winnipeg, but could be Brandon, could be other places. And it's $30 for a trip, regardless of where you live in the Central Plains region. And we're in part of that Central Plains region, and they've actually expanded their boundaries. They really try not to turn anybody down who needs a ride. It probably costs $140 or $50 per ride, just for the gas and the mileage. But they have a whole big group of volunteer drivers who take people into their cancer treatments. And it's some people say, well, why don't you just stay in Winnipeg? Well, some of these treatments, as Sherilyn pointed out, can be 15 minutes. So you drive in, have your treatment, half an hour, you're back out of there. So in 4 to 5 hours, you're back home again, in your own home and able to sleep in your own bed. And so it's much more restful, much less stress. So terrific work they do. I can't remember the number of rides she told me, and I didn't write it down, but it's hundreds of rides a year that they provide. They have other services as well. They have some clothing and different things that they provide for people at a price, but nonetheless, but they try to keep the rides down to $30 flat rate, regardless. So if you come from Alonzo to Winnipeg, it's $30. You come from Carberry to Winnipeg, it's $30. So, and so you can budget for it, and plan for your treatment period. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that's a very helpful service for the area. I mean, having to go and do the treatments, that's intensive. The drive, of course, is intensive. So being able to have a bit of that load off, I'm sure, is a great help.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't know of anybody that hasn't been grateful for it, that's for sure. And Sherilyn's got a tremendous personality, and she joked at the end, she says, now I'll give you my speech about Portage, but she was just kidding.
So out of curiosity, and maybe you'll know this, maybe you won't, but are there any other services like that in Manitoba?
Well, that's a good question.
Or the Westman area, perhaps?
Not that I know of. There's got to be, but because we concentrate our thoughts about Central Plains, because that's part of what we're in. She mentioned something interesting about the fundraising. They used to do a door-to-door canvass, and it was dwindling somewhat. And then, of course, when COVID came along, that was the end of that. So they're doing a telethon, or radiothon, and I can't remember exactly the figures. They did one last year. They raised $77,000 in the radiothon last year.
Okay.
So they're hoping to match that. And they're going to do the radiothon live on location in, I think, 5 of the Stride Credit Union offices.
Oh, nice.
So they're going to set up the radio station and broadcast from the Stride Credit Union offices. So they're doing it here in Neepawa as well.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's really great to hear. And I hope it gets that same amazing support that it has in the past. That would be just excellent.
I don't have the dates, but they're coming up soon. It's going to be, no, I neglected to put the dates in. Bad. Me bad. Anyway, but it's coming up soon and it'll be advertised.
Awesome. All right. Well, we better shift gears here, and we have a little bit of an opinion this week on the show. Ken always has an editorial in each and every paper. It gives a little bit of his perspective, his thoughts on a subject that he's selected. And this week, it is on publishing, our very business. So take us a bit through that. I mean, there was a lot to cover in this, but what were some of your thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, it's I've been involved with publishing since 1966. Not full-time, not all the time, and not continuously, I guess I should say, but certainly continuously for now almost 35 years, when my wife and I started the Neepawa Banner. And the Neepawa Press portion of our business has been around since 1896. The Banner since 1989. The Rivers Banner, which is a sister paper owned by the family, it's been around since 1908. And a lot of papers over the years. A lot disappeared in the 1920s and 30s. It just wasn't viable. Every little town would have had a newspaper at one time, and probably their own printing press at one time. Certainly the Neepawa Press had its own printing press long ago, long before we got involved. But as the presses got bigger and the towns got bigger and some of the towns got smaller, papers disappeared. But in the last number of years, I would say 5 to 7 years, another phenomenon has taken over. And a lot of the people who own newspapers were faced with retirement, and they sold out. And the various corporations like Post Media, Glacier Media, even Winnipeg Free Press or Free Press Publications, started to buy up papers. But they didn't figure out how to run a small local paper.
Right.
And when you're a corporation with shareholders, and they're always watching the share price, shares went down 3 cents today, whatever. Shares went up 8 cents today. You're driven by the profit motive. And I am too. I mean, we've got to make money. We've got to cover our costs. Got to be able to pay everybody, and pay the heat, and pay the taxes, and all the rest of it. The taxes on this building right here are about close to $400 a month. Anyway, when you're only driven by profit, though, you think, how do we cut costs? How do you cut costs? And a lot of those papers, they cut staff. So instead of having 5, they'd have 4 or 3. And in some cases, newspapers got down to 1 or 1.5 staff. And you just can't do it. Mm-hmm. It's just not possible to cover the news, sell the ads, put the paper together, deliver it, all the rest of it. So there's a lot of papers that went out of business because the corporations just said, nope, we're done. We're not going to play this game anymore. But instead of having a local publisher, preferably a local owner publisher, I'm very biased on that, obviously, but they've gone to this corporate route, and I think we're down 20-some papers in Manitoba in the last 5-6 years. The point being here is, though, on the good news side is that people are realizing that there's a value in a newspaper. If you imagine holding this in your hands and say this had been printed 50 years ago, it would still say the same words today as it did 50 years ago.
Right.
You can't change it. You can't run away from your achievements, and you can't run away from your mistakes. Mm-hmm. And people in print know that. And so they always say, get it in writing, right? Get it in writing.
Have that paper trail.
or make sure, a contract isn't worth the air it's written on, and when it's only verbal. So that's the value of the newspaper. Newspaper staff make mistakes. Sure we do. But whatever we put in print is there, and you can't change it. You can't sneak around after midnight and change it on the website, or say, well, I didn't say that, and try and take it off of some kind of a Twitter site or some stupid thing. Mm. Yeah, sorry. That's being judgmental about Twitter. But the point is that the newspaper, the printed word, magazines, whatever, are very, very valuable, because you can depend that they will likely be highly accurate.
Right.
And highly accountable. If we're not accurate, we're held to account. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't exist in the internet world. There's people, I'm ranting here a little too long, but there's people who actively have sites on the internet that their purpose is to mislead.
Yes.
They don't care whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot harder now, I think, to for people to find accurate information from websites that are credible and get held accountable for what they publish.
Yeah. So my hat's off to anybody who's willing to back the publications, print publications, and anybody who's willing to keep trying. Interesting enough, I know of many, many stories where the corporation said, "Yeah, we're done," and they walked away, and people came in and started a new newspaper. Maybe smaller, but at least it's local, and has local content, local people. You know who's writing this damn stuff.
Yeah.
You know? And whereas on the internet, you have no idea and it may not even be people anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a good point too. We have a lot of generative AI stuff floating about now, which honestly is very detrimental, but we don't have time to get into all that.
Yeah, no, the AI thing is just, I can't even fathom how stupid we are to depend on that. You know, because as a joke, a lady did a speech at the Manitoba Community Newspaper Association. She put in a couple of little notes, and AI gave her the speech for that night.
Yeah.
And it wasn't bad, but you could tell that's not right. Where'd they get that from? You know. Yeah. Anyway, I've ranted enough, but get it in writing. Mm-hmm. Get it in writing. But it doesn't matter whether it's a contract or whether it's your news. Get it in writing.
Absolutely. No, you make great points, and perhaps don't need to comment on this longer, but you're absolutely right. I mean, going back, looking in the archives, I see what was written back then on that day for that week, and if they made a mistake, if they were confronted about a mistake, they had it in the next week. Hey, this is the correction, and it was there in writing, and it's unchanged after all these years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can take you downstairs and show you the first paper that was published in 1896. It's right there. Mm-hmm. Still in pretty good condition, too, that paper.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of volumes down there that are in excellent condition. I mean, some are understandably rough, but there is a lot down there that's really solid, really well kept, and it's awesome that we have that as a resource. And like you alluded to, I think that in our current day, I mean, obviously we're the same. We try to address any mistakes that we may have made, whether we catch it ourselves or someone approaches us and just say, hey, just so you know, this needs to be changed a little bit. We'll do that up. But I think people are circling back around and realizing or coming to the realization or re-acknowledging that, yes, this printed paper, this printed news is valuable. And I hope we continue to see that and see more support for newspapers in that way, and in advertising too, because I mean, papers like ourselves, we do rely on advertising to keep the paper free and getting out to everyone. So,
Good points, you bet.
We still have a few more stories here to cover before we run out of time. We're going to flip over to page 8. We have some fantastic news in the community of Neepawa, and helps the region too. Yes, that's on page 8, and that is with the Neepawa Wildlife Association giving a donation to our local food bank here, the Salvation Army or Neepawa Community Ministry Center. There's a little bit of slight differentiation between the two, but they are essentially the same organization, so to speak. They're both Salvation Army. But there was a very generous donation given there of quite a hefty amount of elk meat, if I remember correctly, Ken.
Yeah, I think that probably this may have been an elk that was poached, maybe. I don't know, because I don't think it's elk season right now, but I could be wrong. And if it's processed in a registered plant, they can accept it at the food bank. They can't just accept it legally if it just comes in, oh, here's some meat, you know. So Neepawa Wildlife Association stepped up and paid the processing fee, and they got 300 and some pounds of elk meat, which should go a long way towards 300 pounds. So that'll help a lot with a lot of different families.
Yeah,
and
for
elk
sure.
is good. I've only ever had it once. It is good meat, I'll tell you. Oh,
I can imagine. I mean, I don't think I've had the opportunity to try it myself, but I have had a little bit of deer before. I don't know if it's kind of similar, but I can only imagine what that elk is like, and a big help for sure. I mean, going through the story here, and you'll be able to see the specifics on there yourself if you pick up a hard copy of the paper, or find us online if you're not able to get out and get a hard copy. But that meat's going to be good for a few trips to the store for each of their families, and they're helping like 55 families right now with some food security stuff there. So that's a lot of assistance there, which I mean, that's what they're there for. they're there to help people in need, and they got some great help with that.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's yeah, it is good. It is good meat, and it's a good thing that's happened there for sure.
And right across the page as well, we want to get into this while we still have time. We have the Farmer's Advocate on pages 9 through 12, I believe. And this was another story that you yourself got, but there was a bit of a marketing meeting here from Viterra that gave a little bit of an update about some hopefulness going into the rest of 2024, right?
Yeah, the last year's crop was, generally speaking, in this area and quite a bit of Manitoba, was a very good crop. There's a lot of grain still out there on the farm that hasn't been marketed yet, and so they were addressing that issue, like how long do you hang on and this kind of thing. But there was a lot of good questions came up in the meeting. But a couple of things that really struck me is that right now in the world, according to these experts from Viterra, and they certainly sound like they know what they're talking about, there is more grain than the demand right now. And you would think with the war in Ukraine and the problems in Russia and Ukraine and all the disruptions to shipping and everything, that there would be shortages of grain. But really the only shortages of grain are in certain areas and where there is war. If it's not in a war zone, and even in Ukraine, there's still a lot of grain being moved in spite of all the fighting that's going on. Ukraine produces an awful lot of grain, by the way.
Right.
And not as much as Canada, but an awful lot of grain. And so it was interesting, that study, and they were emphasizing, figure out what your cost of production is. And farmers are notorious for, it went to $10 a bushel, I'm going to wait for 11. Well, when it goes down to $9.40, you don't feel so good about it. Maybe you should have taken the 10.
Right.
But they don't want to lose out on that $10.40 but then they end up sometimes taking $9.40. I've talked to several producers and they said no, they're learning. Set your goal, and you get close to that goal, take it, because it could go down. And they're predicting that grain prices are going to go down because there's an oversupply right now. Hard to believe in a world this big, where you talk about poverty and food shortages and everything, where there's actually an oversupply of grain right now.
Mm-hmm.
If they're cautiously optimistic, because if we're met with another drought year, surprisingly the crop, because of zero tillage and some timely rains, the crop last year survived on less than normal rainfall in a lot of areas, and still came through as a high yield. But that's part of another whole story, change of crop production methods and everything too that goes with it.
Right. Yeah, I know. Obviously, there's a lot of research that goes on in the ag industry to, keep things moving along and improving the seeds that are available, what they're able to withstand, and all that sort of stuff. So that's a very interesting point as well. And actually, I'm curious what the feel is going into the spring season, because we have had an unusual winter this winter.
Well, that's another thing about the caution, because if we don't have a good rain or a good snowfall, now it's only late February, March could bring in a lot of snow, sometimes does, often does actually, but it feels like right now that we're going to have an early spring, and because that could get slapped in the head pretty quick, even on into April. But farmers are watching the skies and watching the forecast, because they could all use a good foot or two of snow out on those fields right now, because they're dry. They're
Absolutely.
Really dry.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, we better quickly wrap things up here. Of course, we have all this and much more that we didn't have time to talk about on today's show, but that's why you need to pick up a hard copy of the paper if you're able to. And of course, if you need to access it online, we have it over at www.mywestman.ca. We post it in full there as well. We'd love to hear from you. If you would like to reach out to us for any stories, if you have an editorial you'd like to send us, or I guess not an editorial, but a letter to the editor, share your opinion. Thumbs up, thumbs down. You can do so at news@neepawabanner.com or 204-476-3401. Reach out to us for advertising as well. And thank you for joining us on the show. Have a great week.